everybody. I am continuing my love affair with all things Canadian, and I'm sitting down today with Anita Toth, who is, I love the title that she's given herself, which is Chief Churn Crusher, at her own consultancy, Anita Toth Inc. She is a voice of customer strategy education, and research expert. That's what her firm does. And her mission is to well, it's not a mission, you actually do this, is to, in essence, you assist companies in increasing their customer retention because you help them better understand what their customers think, what they need, how they feel, and you really hone into that voice, which is everything we need right now in a downturn economy. She's also a 4-time Customer Success Award winner. She teaches as well. I believe the course is Difficult Customer Conversations, which is sort of also could be used in your personal life, I feel. And works with success coaching. We talk about them a bit here. So if you've ever used that educational resource, Anita is one of the professors there. And I believe you're about to become a first-time published author with your book, The Voice of the Customer. So doing a lot. Makes some of us feel like we're a little slow with things, but what I have to just say this, I feel like because as an obnoxious New York American, I feel like Canada was built for customer success because the people are so nice there. And it's like almost like the whole country are experts in customer success because it's just such a nice country. That's my experience with Canadians. I'll be quiet now. But before we do dive into this conversation, tell us about, because this always fascinates me, aside from being a happy Canadian, what was your journey into the world of customer success? How have you become an expert in this?
Oh boy. So a lot of fun. First of all, yes, us Canadians, we thank our bus drivers. Like people will shout from the back of the bus when they're getting off the bus, thank you, I guess, for getting them to their stop safely. And I just grew up that way. I thought everybody did it. But then you go to another city like New York, they even do it in Toronto, which has, I don't know, 3 million people. You'll hear people shouting from the back of the bus sometimes, thank you to the driver, or as they're exiting or on the streetcar. So yeah, I realized that no, they don't do it all over the world.
We do it in New York, but we are really brief and abrupt about it. So it always comes off as very rude. So yeah, you're good. Okay, thanks. I gotta go. But some people meditate to get that calm. I talk to my Canadian colleagues and friends because like, oh, tell me more about your day.
Yeah. So, hey, why don't I tell you a little bit about my very winding path to customer success? It's definitely not direct. So my background actually is working in universities, 20 plus years, 14 of those in an academic research institute. I loved it. I taught there. It was my everything until one day, the dreaded pink slip, the dreaded meeting. Hey, you've been laid off. And because I was on research or in research, which is a smaller part of the university than education, despite applying for 27 jobs on campus, because I'd never worked with students, I couldn't get hired. So the university let me go. And I'd always had side hustles. So I used to sell my friend's honey. He's a beekeeper in 1 kilo jars in my office at the university. And people would come in for, their kilo of honey, and I would sell it there. So I always was really interested in business. And I thought, okay, well, if this is the universe showing me it's time to, strike out on my own. So I tried a bunch of different things, had a Facebook ad agency for a while when Facebook ads were really new. Oh, you could just, the money just kind of poured in because we all didn't know what we were doing, and ended up, I loved it and I hated it because the algorithm was always changing. And I was, for me, that was, it was a great time, but it wasn't something I wanted to stay in. So I closed that business, a little bit of, this and that. And then I wound up in SaaS. And I was like, what is this SaaS? What is this churn? It just fascinated me. And as I got into the world of SaaS and understanding, I did create a consultancy, and it was for SaaS founders to reduce churn. And it was good, but I sort of felt like, there's something I could do a lot more with all of these qualitative research skills. So I tried, speaking with chief revenue officers. That didn't work at all. Mm-hmm. And then in May 2020, I found it was actually Gain, Grow, Retain had just started. And that's when I realized, this is my place. So I always say it's like, when you're in a traffic jam on the highway, you're barely moving, you're frustrated, you're looking up ahead, you can see the road ahead of you is clear, but you're like, oh, I just want to get there. And then once you get into that open road, it just feels amazing. That's what it felt like when I landed in customer success.
I love that. And I love that, first of all, you've researched, so an understanding of data, which is so critical. But then also we could do an entire episode on Facebook and the term customer success because of that one issue. We've all been there where you finally think you figured it out. And then you're like, wait, what? What did they just do?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Absolutely. But, it's, I think, finding that light at the tunnel is kind of an important facet, because I know you've said before, it all starts with the voice of the customer, sort of like finding your own voice at that point. And while most companies kind of get that in theory, they don't seem to be able to get it right. So as you went on this journey, why is that? Why do you think they understand the theory, but they can't get it right? Why is that?
There are two big things I've come across. One is a lack of knowledge. So when companies, they don't know, voice of customers is a solution to a retention issue. So really it's focusing on retention. Well, what can we do? And so one of the things I find is they have sort of a bits and pieces solution. So yeah, we've got some surveys, maybe we've talked to some customers, but they don't know how to bring it together in a comprehensive strategy. That's one thing. The second is we're software, we work in software. So we look for software solutions, not realizing that the software will end up augmenting or illustrating if there are process problems. So we're bringing this software in, it should solve our problem. And then, you realize now your data is even worse than before. Now there's, 10 different things that you're trying to struggle and deal with. So I think that's one thing. It's this bits and pieces, lack of strategy approach. It's looking to software for the solution. So it's education. They don't know that a strategy is what they really need. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, and this is the bigger thing, is that with knowledge comes responsibility to do something about it. So it's the old, if I don't look, if I don't get validation or confirmation, then I don't have to deal with it, even though it could be a really big nagging problem. And we see this like all the way from health issues to relationship issues. It translates over to business, and you're already busy, feeling, stressed out, having all this stuff going on. And then to go, oh, let's go digging to find out what's really going on with our customers. And then realizing, oh, now I have to make this change. Now we've got to implement this. We've got to change this. And at times, frankly, it can just feel really overwhelming. So those are the two things. So it's a lack of a strategy. So they're looking for other things to try to make up for that lack of strategy. And then it's just full stop fear. I'm scared because if I learn and I get confirmation or validation or I learn something new, now I got to deal with it. And I'm not sure that I can.
So in essence, you've got, if you look at it, you're talking about strategy, right? So say I think of companies and I think, okay, they've got their surveys, right? They're doing their surveys. They've got they think that they've got like a process in place, um, but maybe it's shallow, it's not deep enough. But there's a third element in there too, and I know you've touched on it before, which is you were talking about fear and prioritization, right? Like, what do you prioritize? So, but a lot of people say, okay, we know our priorities, we've got our surveys, and we've got some data points that we're looking at. Look, we're predicting our churn, we've got all of this. But can we expand on that? Because I think a lot of companies really do think they have a strategy, but they don't. So how have you found these gaps like with your customers? Because when I think of the 3 points that we just discussed, it's very much so almost like that you're talking at somebody rather than with them. So how do you find, tell me about these gaps.
Oh, Stephanie, you just gave the answer. You just came up with the answer. You didn't even know it. Surveys are a monologue. Interviews are a dialogue. And they're missing that interview piece. That's really what it is. Interviews are used to go deep, small sample set, right? Mm-hmm. You're not talking to all of your customers. Maybe you're talking to 10, 20, 30 of them, depending on what it is you're trying to do. When you go through and you analyze the data, you're going to start finding patterns. Then you take those patterns and use surveys to test to see if they are valid across either a particular customer segment or your entire customer base. That's where companies miss the mark. They think the surveys should be doing the work of finding the data, those new insights, what's really going on in their customer's mind. You can't. There's not enough context. It's a monologue. It's one way. The customer gives you some sort of answer and you're left going, well, we think this is what it is. There's no context to it. But a conversation, well, that's totally different because you can ask for context. You can ask them to go deeper. You can pivot to a slightly different direction in that conversation. So the strategy really should be interviews first, deep. You start identifying those patterns, then you use surveys as a way to validate if those patterns are accurate across either a particular customer segment or your entire customer base.
So we talked about, we talk about surveys, we talk about interviews. What are the most common ways that in your experience, SaaS companies are collecting their voice of customer data?
Well, surveys being one for sure. NPS is still really popularly used, often very incorrectly, but that's either for another conversation or we can touch on that just briefly later on. It's really they're missing how to tie together these various voice of customer activities. Okay, so it's things like, it's not just interviews and surveys. It's hearing from your customer advisory board. It's tying in customer success managers are speaking with customers all the time. They get to hear things very differently than support does. Mm-hmm. So it's bringing all of this data together. How do you do it? And then over time. So who should we be talking to when? Meaning, is it, you have to have some continuous voice of customer activities. Mm-hmm. And then some of them should be, just for various projects. Like if you're looking to roll something out, before you roll it out, talk to your customers to find out about the potential impacts before they happen. Not once you've implemented and realize, oh, we didn't think of this, then now this is a knockoff effect. Now we got these 20 other things to deal with. So it has to be the two together, continuous data collection, as well as using tools like surveys, interviews, focus groups to talk to customers before you implement something big, before there's a major investment, to see how it's going to impact them.
So in essence, a lot of companies are really using observational data.
They are.
So
You've got it.
Instead of contextual. Do you want to go back to NPS? Because it is whether you love it or hate it, but NPS, CSAT, CES, but NPS is really an industry standard. I think our audience would be curious to hear some of the pitfalls with relying on it. Feel free, please give us your opinion.
Okay, so I'm not anti-NPS. I just want to make that clear right here. And even the gentleman who, came up with it and really promoted it, Fred Reichheld, he's not against NPS either. But what has happened is NPS was a system, and it ended up becoming a focus on a score. And then what was supposed to be an outcome has now become a target. So our NPS has to be 80. And so, I don't know, companies will do whatever it takes to bump their NPS score up to 80. Well, is that really the right approach? And so it's even, in Fred saying that it shouldn't be a target. It just should give you a little bit of information along with a whole bunch of other data that you're collecting through other surveys, through observation, through interviews, focus groups, those types of things, to say, okay, are we on the right track here? That's really all that NPS should be used for. The other thing is companies often don't have, again, a strategy. They just sort of, we'll put this, twice a year. There, are the same people answering the questions? Is it segmented? And then they're relying on making sometimes critical decisions on very low response rates. If your response rates are 10%, that means 90% of your customers didn't respond. That's frightening to make a decision based on only 10% of your customer base. So those are really the two big things. NPS, yes, you can still use it, but you have to know how to use it and why you're using it. If it's just to target, then you're better not to even use it at all.
It's really interesting, observation to say that, because it can be almost like a sales quota that's being hit without any, if we're at this number, then I think that conversation gets dropped off, which is the why. Why are we at this number? What have we learned? What are we learning? What do we need to learn? Who are we talking to? It has just literally become like a Yelp review, I feel, in certain ways. So that's an interesting point of view. It's an indicator more than anything, just like churn is an indicator, because churn, something has already happened when a client churns. So understanding it. So this brings up a thought for me, which is a lot of companies, particularly small ones that don't have as much bandwidth, will head to their surveys or their data and just like you said, make what they think is an educated decision, right?
Yes.
Because, or even companies that are scaling, maybe they can't do the one-on-ones as much as they could. So we understand that. So data tells only half the story. So what else do they need to consider in addition to that? Because you're only getting numerical or data points with that. You're missing a little bit of a picture. So what else do they need to consider?
I would say they're missing half the picture or more, because data, it's just a number, and then you're making your stories up around it. And those stories might be wrong. And I'm going to push back and also say that even startups should be talking to their customers. You don't have to talk to 50 a week and interview them. You can do a cadence of 1 a week. Or 2 a week. But the point is, you should be regularly interviewing. And the reason why I say interviewing and not just calling them up and see what's going on, you want to ask have your questions in advance and ask the same questions over and over to the customers you're interviewing, so that over time you can see those patterns. If you're asking different questions or phrasing it differently, you're going to get slightly different results. So standardization becomes key so that you can track it and go, whoa, in the beginning, when we were asking this question, these were the types of maybe 3 responses we got. We're 6 months in, we're asking the exact same question. And now we're hearing something new we haven't heard before, because our world is constantly changing, right? Customer needs are changing. So I would say, most importantly, as a startup, if you want to become, growth is important, but you also want to be profitable. Profit comes from, retaining those customers and then expanding them. So talk with them even once a week, 30 minutes, pick one customer, 30 minutes, have your questions in advance. And then I always record and transcribe. It's the easiest way to do it. I mean, you likely have a Zoom account, and there's cheap transcription that's done through AI. It's not pretty, and sometimes it mixes words up, but it at least takes that off of your hands. And then you could just quickly go through and analyze or pick out these patterns. So that's, to me, companies can't afford not to do this, because if you are wrong in how you're interpreting your data, it can be very expensive. And you're putting a lot of time and resources behind it. And for some companies, especially startups, if you're headed the wrong direction because you misinterpreted the data you have, because you didn't get the context from customers, that could be the end of your business.
So context.
Got it.
And
otherwise you're guessing.
a few minutes earlier, you mentioned customer success board.
Advisory, customer advisory board. Yep.
So are you saying that should companies look to that to be a collective of customers, or are you saying to bring in some outside experts to kind of help guide that mission?
Great question. So customer advisory boards, for startups, I would say the best time to bring them in is when the company is growing, not when you're early startup. You want to, get your traction and start, getting what they call product market fit. Customer advisory boards are so you have your board for your company, hopefully, which is usually advisors and outside people. Your customer advisory board is actually made up of your customers. Same thing, usually no more than 6, maybe 8 on the larger side. They come in and it's the same thing. They have terms. They agree to why they're there. And the cadence might be, they meet once a year or twice a year. And that's where you really go deep. They're helping you to understand from the customer's perspective, helping build the business, if you will. So customer advisory boards are really powerful, but I will say, though, that they take work. They take work to recruit, and then you have to put on these events. When we would do it, when I worked at the university, actually, ours would be a full day event where people would fly in. Other companies do it over 2 or 3 days. Sometimes they do it virtually, but it's not an hour. You are, when you get together that once a year, you are working really hard. And so it's usually multi-day in figuring out sort of the trajectory, but from the customer's perspective, not from the board, your other board's perspective. So you have to be ready to make that investment, but it's incredibly powerful. And again, as part of that voice of customer.
It does really sound like a, strategy that comes about when you're in that growth stage,
Yeah.
when you're kind of really fully into scale. And it, as we all know, as customer success becomes more in the forefront, now we're seeing CCOs, not chief creative officer, but chief customer officer
Yeah.
roles. It gives more validity. A lot of conversations that we've been having this year are that customer success and product need to go hand in hand, because the product development, the product roadmap can really, really change based on that customer experience. And this is all very logical, right? Like it's all very logical. But I think now people hearing it out loud are more compelled to start to take action on it and further break down existing silos or structures with how they they go by being a product led company, because they've got to have the customer voice in their head while they're doing that. Because Facebook is another great example, I think, of a company. Again, we should just do a whole other series on that, about how you could almost say that the voice of the customer is never considered,
Mm.
um, at times, if anybody's used their ad manager or anything like that, or business manager. But it's interesting. I think I hear what you're saying. I'm hearing, it's got to be front and center. It's got to be part of scale, and it is an ongoing evolutionary process, just like the concept of having contextual conversations are with your customers. So I find that I want to go back a little bit towards that, having those interviews. Most people, what you're giving is sound advice. A lot of times, I think most companies focus on post onboarding interviews a lot more than they do on, say, an exit interview. Um, can you just briefly explain to our audience why exit interviews are so, while it's as you teach a course on difficult customer conversations, why exit interviews are so, so very important?
Um, because you find out, like you had said earlier, Stephanie, about like, what's gone wrong. And it's never one thing. It never is. When customers sign up, there's something called the customer emotional journey. Okay. So the customer comes in, they have a problem, or they have something going on that they're looking for a solution. When right before they sign up, their emotions actually go up. Hope. Oh, wow. Oof, I found this. Let's hope it works. So they're at a peak, and they're willing to pay whatever the money is, right? They pay, they become a customer. And somewhere after they become a customer, if everything is good, they're finding value, and expectations are meeting reality, and they feel good, they'll stay up there at that kind of hope, positive feeling. They may or may not be your best customer, but the point is that everything's going good. The problem is when they don't either experience what they perceive as value, not what you as the company thinks they should value,
Yeah.
what they perceive, expectations meet reality. And so maybe their customer experience isn't so great either. So now you've got sort of kind of emotions. And then you have those where, we call it buyer's remorse. We've all had it, where you've purchased something and you've bought it and you went, oh, I regret buying it. So you have to look at the emotional journey. And this is kind of the problem. So when companies are doing exit interviews, they want to know, well, why did you leave? Oh, it was the price. Well, price is always the justification. It's feelings that drove the decision to say the price was too high. Well, the price wasn't too high when you signed up and became a customer. So what has changed? That's what you're looking for in an exit interview. If you were up here at Hope when you purchased, You were looking forward, thinking that this was the solution. What happened that you went from here down here to now you've decided the best course of action is to leave?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're trying to figure out in an exit interview.
And for
Really, what are
anybody,
all those things?
right. And for anybody that's like, well, it was because our guy left the company. That's still, I just want to shout out there, you still means that we failed to show value to that person. And take the time to onboard them or get them aligned with why the company has signed up with them. But speaking, let's talk about that a little bit, because that talks about evolution, right? Like the
Mhm.
person who signed up for your product or the end user that winds up using your product is going to change eventually. People leave jobs, people grow, your product changes as well. So, that being said, the voice of your customer needs to evolve as your company grows as well. So, how do you do that?
Great question. So when you're first starting out, let's just go quickly through the journey. When you're first starting out, you want to keep it simple. I would recommend the whatever your survey is. It could be an exit survey as well, as a customer is, they're leaving. Maybe you don't have the time to do the exit interviews, right then and there. So you have some surveys. I would really recommend, though, when you're in startup, doing exit interviews. If you're going to do any interviews, do those exit ones, or right as they're churning. It's going to give you tremendous information about product problems, expectations, value, all of those things. Keep it simple. That's really all you need when you're startup. When you're going into early growth, though, this is where a strategy is necessary. You have to start looking at not only, okay, let's just talk with all of our customers through a survey. That's great. But you really need to start then tapping into the different segments. So your decision makers are going to, they should have separate surveys. They should have separate types of interviews from end users. And this is where companies really tend to miss the mark. Like I said, they don't have a strategy. They just sort of keep doing what they were doing before and just ramp it up and send it out to more people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what you want. Your decision makers are going to have vastly different responses as to why they purchased, what they like, what they don't like, than the end users. The end users didn't even make the decision making to buy the product, but they're working with the product. So you want to learn as much about the challenges with the product from the end users, but you want to learn from the decision makers why, what problem were you looking to solve? How did we do well? How didn't we do well?
Mm-hmm.
What were some other considerations you had before you bought? Not just competitors, but maybe cobbling together their own system. Like, you want to discover all of this stuff. So you need to start looking at the different types of individuals within the account, the customer account, and then track that over time. And then all you do, honestly, Stephanie, is just add more complexity as you grow. So like I said, then you start, adding more continuous data collection. That's not just observation. So again, you want that context. You want to be talking. This is where customer advisory boards, focus
Mm-hmm.
groups, interviews, employee feedback, you want all of that, as well as, like I talked about, those sort of spot ones. Okay, we're looking to roll this out. Let's talk to customers before we roll this out to see if we're headed in the right direction. So that's all you end up doing, is adding complexity to it. And you really start then not just, the different users, but also different customer segments, and start seeing what are the difference between, maybe tier 1 and tier 3, and not just, what they do and who they are, but how they think, how they feel, what are their goals. And so it just becomes more complex.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it all gives you better decision making, really confidence and clarity. Those are the two things you're getting. There's no, it reduces the risk of guessing, making stories up. We think this is what it is. It removes that. So then you go, hey, we're pretty confident, 95% confident that we're headed in the right direction. Let's do this. Why? Because you've gathered the data before you've gone ahead and made that major decision.
I like that. I like the confidence and clarity, because when you say the word complexity, that fear element comes in, because it's a lot of work, and segmentation is a bit of work. The follow-up with segmentation impacts almost every aspect of the business, because you're talking
Right.
about content strategy, you're talking about your PPC, you're talking about, a variety of, you're talking about product features, benefits, it's all of the tools, it's how sales approaches outbound, it's inbound, it's everything. But complexity ultimately implies that you're growing. So it's an interesting one. So with that in mind, let's touch a little bit, because we're slowly running out of time. I feel like I talk to you everywhere. But let's talk about growth retention strategies quickly, and how a brand can identify what resonates with their clients and leverage it, in essence.
Okay. I'm not quite sure. Was there a question there? Is there something specific you want me to hit
But I
on?
mean, I think, no, it's good, because when you say growth retention strategy, it can be very broad.
It is.
So when I think about growth retention strategies, I think about ways that I can see that resonate with clients, that I can touch on and use it as a point to not just retain those customers, but grow, touch on something that could be possibly universal, or possibly something that is a feature of the product, for instance, that perhaps we didn't realize resonated so strongly
Right.
with a subset of the customer. So I wanted to get your take on that, because that is all part of I think that's part of voice of customer that we sometimes don't take into account, that there's a growth strategy for it, not just a retention.
Absolutely. So it goes right back to, I don't know, earlier in our discussion with interviewing and surveying. So if you're finding that it's resonating with this particular group, you speak with them. Do a small sample of them. Run some interviews to find out what specifically is it. Because there's something going on in their heads or in what they're doing in their everyday work, that this particular thing really seems helpful for them. Well, you want to dig down and find out what that is. Then, like we talked about, use the surveys to see, does this also resonate in the same way, again, either in a certain customer segment or across the entire customer base? And if not, why? That's really, so you're comparing and contrasting to see, okay, this group really seems to like this. What's different about them from the rest of our customers? That's what you're trying to find out. And those are those types of surveys. Remember, I said there's sort of continuous collection. So continuous collection would be, around churn or exit interviews, right? That you'll continuously collect, or post onboarding, collect that continuously. But then when you find that there are certain things like you just described where there's an opportunity for growth, you want to dig in deep and find out, okay, what's going on here? Rather than trying again to bring your own context to it, find out, speak with those customers and see, how did they differ from your larger customer base or the rest of that, perhaps even customer segment, where they're not so intrigued or interested, or it's not as valuable. Why? That's all you're going through and trying to figure out. Then you don't have to guess. That's where the confidence and clarity comes from, because there's no confidence or clarity in guessing. There's zero. But once you've talked to them and went, oh, you know what? This group right here, they all have something that may not even, like, you're like, whoa, we didn't even see that it was connected to, X over here. And meanwhile, the rest of the customer segment or customer base isn't even, X isn't even in the picture for them. Wow. And then suddenly there's your clarity, there's your confidence. We see it. We've spoken, we've got numbers, we see the pattern, and then we compared it to everyone else and didn't find it there. So there's something unique going on here. How can we leverage that?
I love it. And I feel like our designer, it may, when she's editing this video, you'll see like these graphics pop up around your head, like with just why, ask why. If that's the key takeaway is you need to understand the why to me. I I think there's just been so much flush information like that you provided. One thing before we part, like if there's one piece of advice that you can give to an early growth company, what would it be? You know,
The one piece of advice is your customers have your answers. They do. If you want to know what features you should develop next for the roadmap, if you're wondering which content will, attract the most prospective customers, all of that, your current customers have all that. They have all this information. You are literally sitting on a gold mine that can help you figure out how to make your sales cycles shorter. Your customers will tell you. Why did you win some? Why did you lose some customers? They'll tell you. You've got to talk to them. And I think that's the biggest thing. It feels like, now I've got to add this. Flip it. Wow. This can give me confidence and clarity so I can go into that and de-risk making a mistake, heading in the wrong direction. Look at it that way. I'm actually de-risking by speaking with my customers. I'm actually getting confidence and clarity. And I can use a small talk, go out, do 5 customer interviews, 10 customer interviews. And if you can't do it, hire us, reach out. That's what we do. And then go to your board and say, this is what we're finding. And now we have hard data. These are not guesses. These are not presumptions. We have the data. This is what our customers told us. And that becomes the story you tell. That is incredibly powerful.
I think first of all, I want to close out. It's been so great talking with you today. But if the one thing, if you haven't heard, if you didn't hone into that, customer success teams and understanding your customer voice are critical, not just for your product today, but also tomorrow. And it's not a area of your business that can stay in one specific zone siloed from everybody else. It affects sales. It is a direct line to marketing. It is a direct line to product development and really honing in on the customer's needs and wants as opposed to the perceived needs and wants. But more importantly, it's a living and breathing entity that requires care and understanding. And so I really, really look forward to seeing how these strategies evolve this year, particularly the next, 12 to 18 months as we're on unstable economic grounds, globally. And also it's going to be interesting to see how people try and push AI into this forefront area as well, and where that may or may not land and how. It's an interesting time to be in the SaaS space for sure. But I would say if anybody's looking to grow and retain their customers, visit Anita on LinkedIn, on social, go to her website, take her class. If anything, it's a great one to have both personally and professionally. Difficult conversations happen in all facets of our life. I thank you again for your time. And again, I'm a big proponent of if you want to meditate, but you can't do that, talk to somebody from Canada. It will make you happy.
Oh, before we go, Stephanie, can I just say one thing? Because of this economic downturn, companies are worried, not sure. Like we talked about a lot, and the question is, how do I do this? So I'm in the process right now. We're creating all of this. It's an increase your customer retention workshop, which we're going to start running in mid-April 2023. But we're going to open the doors in the next month or so for that. It's a beta right now, and we are looking for 10 companies. Usually early growth is about the best to come in and help us out. And you'll see the same things. We're going to ask you questions. What did you like? What didn't you like? The whole point, though, is to get a win and then show to executive team, to the board, how that win can help solve some of the challenges that might come with this, economic hardship. So I just wanted to put that out there. If anyone is interested, AnitaToth.ca is my website, or like Stephanie mentioned, LinkedIn as well is a great place to
And
reach me.
we'll make sure that we have all the details when this gets published. We'll put it on our blog as well. And who knows, maybe Anita and I will sidebar and see if we can give a deal to some of our followers. But
Absolutely.
so I think that's a great workshop. It's an important one, and thank you for sharing it. I look forward to learning much more about it. So again, Anita Toth is with us today. She is Voice of Customer Master. So please reach out to her if you are, as all of us are, curious how you can retain and grow your business. Thank you so much, Anita. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye.